The morning light filtered through the windows of Morning Ground's coffee shop, painting golden stripes across the worn wooden counter. Olivia Bennett wiped down the espresso machine for the third time, her eyes flickering to the clock above the door. 7:12. 3 minutes. She hated that she knew the exact time he would arrive. Hated that her heart did this stupid little jump. Every single morning when the bell above the door chimed at precisely 7:15. But most of all, she hated that after 6 months of serving him coffee, she still didn't know anything about him except that he took his Americano black, never smiled, and wore the kind of clothes that suggested a life very different from hers. The bell chimed. Olivia's hands moved automatically, reaching for the ceramic cup she'd already prepared. She'd learned early on that he preferred ceramic over paper, appreciated the small things that most rushed customers overlooked. Today's cup had a tiny sketch she'd drawn during the slow afternoon yesterday. A simple bird in flight, wings spread wide against an invisible sky. "Good morning," she said, her voice bright despite the gray Seattle drizzle outside. "The usual?" James Whitmore nodded, avoiding eye contact as always, and slid exact change across the counter. His fingers were long and ink-stained, she noticed, not for the first time. Creative hands. Hands that made things. As she turned to pull his espresso shot, she caught his reflection in the metal machine. He was looking at the cup, really looking at it, his dark eyes tracing the lines of her little bird. Something flickered across his face, an expression too quick to name, before the familiar mask of polite distance returned. What Olivia didn't know was that James Whitmore had 17 of her cups at home. 17 ceramic cups, with 17 tiny drawings that he'd carefully taken from the return bin when she wasn't looking, telling himself each time that it would be the last, that taking them was strange, that he should just talk to her like a normal person. But James Whitmore wasn't good at normal. He was good at buildings and blueprints, at creating spaces where other people could live their loud, messy, beautiful lives while he remained safely behind his drafting table. Words failed him in ways that design never did. "Here you go," Olivia said, setting the cup down. Their fingers brushed accidentally, and she felt electricity shoot up her arm. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. "Thank you." His voice was quiet, almost lost in the hiss of the espresso machine, but she heard something new in it today, a warmth that hadn't been there before. He took the cup and moved to his usual table by the window, the one that overlooked the street where the city was beginning to wake up. Olivia watched him from the corner of her eye as she served other customers, the way he cradled the cup in both hands, the way he seemed to study her drawing like it was something precious. The morning rush came and went. Lawyers and nurses, students and retirees, all seeking their caffeine salvation before facing another day. Olivia moved through the routine with practiced ease, but part of her attention remained tethered to the quiet man by the window. At 7:45 he stood, same time as always. He'd stay exactly 30 minutes, not a moment more or less. But today, as he approached the counter to return his cup, something was different. He hesitated, his mouth opening as if to speak, and Olivia felt her breath catch. He started, then stopped. His eyes met hers for just a second, dark and intense and utterly lost. Before he placed the cup down and walked quickly toward the door, Olivia released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Stupid, she told herself. He's just a customer. A regular who likes his coffee black and his mornings quiet. Nothing more. But as she picked up his cup to wash it, she noticed something that made her heart stop. There, on the napkin beneath where the cup had been, was a sketch. Not her sketch, but his. A detailed, beautiful rendering of the coffee shop. Every detail perfect. From the crooked picture frame on the wall, to the chip in the corner of her counter, and in the window of the drawing, barely visible but unmistakably there, was a small figure with her hair, her apron, her smile. The bell chimed again. Olivia looked up, hoping irrationally that he'd come back, that he'd explain, that he'd say something, anything. But it was just another customer. Someone asking for a vanilla latte and looking impatient. She folded the napkin carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket. feeling its weight against her hip for the rest of her shift. That evening, as she locked up the shop, she pulled it out again, studying the careful lines, the attention to detail, the way he'd captured something she saw every day but had never really noticed. He'd been watching her, really watching her, and tomorrow morning at 7:15 he'd be back, and she'd have her own response ready. What Olivia didn't know was that at that exact moment, James Whitmore was sitting in his minimalist downtown apartment, surrounded by blueprints and elevation drawings, trying and failing to focus on the most important project of his career. His eyes kept drifting to the 17 cups lined up on his bookshelf, 17 small pieces of someone else's creativity that had somehow become the brightest things in his carefully controlled world. Tomorrow, he told himself. Tomorrow he'd say something. Tomorrow he'd be brave. But tomorrow was still 12 hours away. And the space between intention and action had always been where James Whitmore got lost. The portfolio hit the floor of morning grounds with a sound that made everyone turn. Papers scattered across the worn wood, blueprints and sketches sliding under tables and chairs like they were trying to escape. James Whitmore stood frozen in the doorway, his face drained of color, staring at the disaster he'd just created. Olivia was already moving, dropping to her knees to gather the spilled papers. "It's okay," she said automatically, reaching for a large blueprint that had rolled itself up under a customer's chair. "Happens all the time." Well, just her words died as she saw what she was holding. It was a building. But not just any building. The blueprint showed a stunning modern structure with walls of glass and warm wood, open spaces flowing into intimate corners, and at its heart, a large commercial kitchen surrounded by dining areas and gathering spaces. In the margin, written in precise architectural lettering, were the words Riverside Community Culinary Center. "Please don't," James's voice cracked. He was beside her now, reaching for the papers with shaking hands. But Olivia had already seen the other sketches. Drawings of the same building from different angles, interior elevations showing industrial ovens and marble countertops, perspective renderings that made the space feel alive. And tucked between the professional drawings, folded small like secrets, were her napkin sketches. Every single bird, flower, and small design she'd ever drawn on his cups over the past 6 months, carefully preserved and filed with his most important work. "You kept them," she whispered, looking up at him. James's face was burning red. "I know it's strange. I'm sorry. I should have asked. They made me happy." And I don't usually. He was talking too fast, stumbling over words. This polished professional reduced to stammering confusion.
"Oh.
"Why do you have drawings of me?" Olivia held up another sketch, this one showing her behind the counter, laughing at something. Captured in a moment she didn't remember, but recognized as true. "Because I can't stop thinking about you." The words came out raw and honest, bypassing whatever filter usually kept James's thoughts safely locked inside. He immediately looked horrified at his own admission. The coffee shop had gone quiet. Other customers were pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. Olivia became aware they were creating a scene, that her boss was watching from the back with raised eyebrows, that her cheeks were flaming hot. "Can we?" She gestured toward the corner table, his table, and James nodded moo. They gathered the remaining papers in silence and moved to the window seat. Olivia's hands were shaking slightly as she organized the blueprints, trying to understand what she was seeing. "Tell me about this," she said finally. Pointing to the culinary center, James took a breath, and when he spoke again, his voice was steadier. This was his language, the vocabulary of buildings and purpose. "It's my proposal for the old Riverside Warehouse District. The city's accepting development bids next week. Most firms want to build luxury condos, but I thought." He hesitated, then continued. "I thought the neighborhood needed something different. A place where people could learn, create, share food and culture." Olivia studied the plans more carefully. The building was brilliant, full of light and possibility, but it was the details that caught her attention. A teaching kitchen designed for multiple instructors. A commercial bakery space with professional equipment. Small vendor stalls for local food artisans. Community dining areas where people could gather regardless of income. "This is incredible," she said softly. "This could change everything for this neighborhood." "That's the idea." James's fingers traced the edge of the blueprint. "I've been designing variations of this building for 3 years. Different locations, different configurations. But this version, this one feels right." Paused. "I designed it thinking about what you might need." Olivia's head snapped up. "What I might need? You talk about opening a bakery someday? I've heard you mention it to customers. Seeing the way your face lights up when you describe the pastries you want to make, you wouldn't meet her eyes. I thought, if I could create a space that made that dream possible. Not just for you, but for others like you. People with talent and passion, but no capital or connections. You designed a building for me. It wasn't a question." I designed a building inspired by you," he corrected quietly. "By the way you make every morning better for strangers. By the creativity you put into tiny drawings that no one else would bother with. By the fact that you see people, really see them, even quiet ones, who can't figure out how to say hello properly." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. She looked down at the blueprints, seeing them differently now. Not just as architectural drawings, but as a love letter written in lines and elevations, in carefully calculated spaces designed to hold dreams. "When do you present this?" she asked. James's expression shifted, the brief confidence fading. "Tomorrow afternoon, 2:00. To the City Planning Commission and potential investors." "And you're ready?" He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I'm terrified. I'm brilliant at designing buildings, terrible at convincing people to believe in them. Every time I have to present, I freeze. My partner usually handles the pitches, but he's in Tokyo on another project. It's just me tomorrow." Olivia saw the fear in his eyes, recognized it as the same fear she felt every time. She thought about leaving the safety of her barista job to chase her baking dreams. The fear of being seen, of wanting something so badly that rejection would shatter you. "I'll come," she said impulsively. "What?" "Tomorrow. I'll come to your presentation. You don't have to be alone." James stared at her like she'd offered him something impossible. "You'd do that?" "You've been collecting my terrible coffee cup drawings for 6 months. It's the least I can do." She smiled, trying to lighten the moment, but her voice came out thick with emotion. He smiled back, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "They're not terrible. They're perfect." They sat there for a moment, the morning light shifting around them, the familiar sounds of the coffee shop fading into background noise. Between them, spread across the table, were blueprints for a future neither of them could quite believe in yet. But maybe, just maybe, they could build together. "James," Olivia said softly, "why didn't you ever just talk to me?" He looked down at his hands. "Because I'm better at showing than telling. Because every morning I'd plan what to say, and every morning the words would disappear the moment I saw you. Because he finally met her eyes. Because you're the kind of person who brings light into ordinary moments. And I didn't know how to exist in that light without getting burned. I'm just a barista who draws birds on coffee cups. You're extraordinary," he said simply. "And tomorrow, when I'm standing in front of those investors trying to explain why this building matters, I'm going to be thinking about that. About you. About the fact that some people make the world better just by being in it." Olivia reached across the table and took his hand, those ink-stained creative fingers that built beautiful things. "Then let's make sure they see what I see. Tomorrow at 2:00, everything would change." But for now, they sat together in the morning light, holding hands across blueprints and dreams, to people who'd spent 6 months in silence finally learning to speak. The conference room on the 15th floor of the municipal building felt like a courtroom. Long table, harsh fluorescent lights, 5 stern faces belonging to city commissioners and 3 more belonging to potential investors, whose checkbooks could make or break dreams. Olivia sat in the back row of public seating, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles had gone white. James stood at the front, his presentation displayed on the screen behind him. He looked professional and composed in his dark suit, but Olivia could see the tremor in his hands as he shuffled his notes. She'd watched him practice in the coffee shop that morning, had seen the passion in his voice when he described his vision. But now faced with these skeptical eyes, that passion seemed to be drowning in fear. "The Riverside Community Culinary Center," James began, his voice barely above a whisper. Someone in the front row leaned forward, straining to hear. "It's designed to serve the neighborhood's need for," he stopped. His eyes went blank, the carefully rehearsed words evaporating like steam. Olivia watched him scan his notes desperately, saw the exact moment panic set in. The commissioners exchanged glances. One investor checked his watch. "Mr. Whitmore," the head commissioner said, not unkindly, "perhaps you'd like a moment." But a moment wouldn't help. Olivia could see that James was disappearing into himself, retreating to that safe internal space where buildings existed only on paper, and no one could judge them or find them wanting. In another minute, he'd apologize and sit down, and this beautiful dream would die before it ever had a chance to breathe. She stood up. "May I say something?" The words left her mouth before her brain could stop them. Every head in the room turned toward her. James's eyes widened in surprise and something that looked like relief. The head commissioner frowned. "This is a closed presentation, Miss Bennett." "Olivia Bennett. I'm a community stakeholder. I work at Morning Grounds Coffee Shop, 3 blocks from the proposed site." She walked toward the front of the room, her legs steadier than she felt. "And I think I can help explain what Mr. Whitmore is trying to say." She reached James's side and lowered her voice. "May I?" He nodded mutely, stepping back to let her approach the screen. Olivia had never spoken to a room full of powerful people before, had never pitched anything more significant than the daily special. But as she looked at James's blueprints displayed behind her, she felt something click into place. These weren't just drawings. They were possibility made visible. "Let me tell you what this building really is," she began, her voice growing stronger. "Every morning, people come into my coffee shop. They're nurses finishing night shifts, construction workers starting early, students cramming for exams, elderly folks who just don't want to eat breakfast alone. They come for coffee, yes, but they stay for connection. For that moment when someone sees them, knows their order, asks about their day." She gestured to the blueprint. "This building? It's that feeling, but bigger. The teaching kitchen here. This isn't just about learning to cook. It's about immigrant grandmothers teaching their traditional recipes to anyone who wants to learn. Preserving culture through food. The commercial bakery space. It's for people like me, people who have skills and dreams, but no access to the equipment or capital to start a business." One of the investors leaned forward, interested now. Olivia pressed on. "The community dining area. Mr. Whitmore designed it so that half the seating is reserved for pay-what-a-can meals, funded by the cafe revenue from the other half. Nobody goes hungry, nobody feels like charity, just neighbors feeding neighbors." Her voice caught slightly. He thought of everything. "Not because he's trying to make money, though I believe this project would be profitable, but because he actually cares about people having places to belong." She turned to look at James, who was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite name. "Mr. Whitmore comes into my coffee shop every single morning. Same time, same order. And I used to think he was just another businessman, distant and disconnected. But then I saw these plans, and I realized something. He's been watching, really watching, seeing what the neighborhood needs, what people like me need, and trying to build an answer." Olivia faced the commissioners again. "You could approve another luxury condo development. Heaven knows there are enough proposals for those. But in 10 years, what will those buildings have contributed besides rent that local people can't afford? This building, this vision, it could change lives. It could give people like me a chance to build something lasting." The room was silent. Then the head commissioner spoke. "Miss Bennett, you said people like you. What did you mean?" "I have a degree in culinary arts. I've been working as a barista for 4 years because I can't afford the startup costs for a bakery. The equipment alone would cost more than I make in 2 years." She felt exposed saying this out loud, admitting her dreams to strangers. "If this building existed, I could rent kitchen space by the hour, test my recipes, build a customer base, actually pursue what I'm passionate about, without risking everything." "And how many others are there like you in this neighborhood?" one of the investors asked. Dozens, Olivia said immediately. Maybe hundreds. People with skills and no opportunity. Cultures and cuisines that deserve to be celebrated. Families who need gathering spaces that don't require spending money they don't have. She looked back at James again. He was watching her with something like wonder. She realized this was what he'd been trying to say all along but couldn't find the words for. So she'd find them for him. Mr. Whitmore isn't good at talking about his work, she said honestly. But he's brilliant at seeing what's needed and designing solutions. This building, it's not just architecture. It's hope made physical. It's possibility with a foundation. Olivia stepped back, suddenly aware of what she'd just done. She'd crashed a professional presentation, spoken out of turn, probably broken a dozen rules. But as she met James's eyes, saw the gratitude and something deeper there, she couldn't bring herself to regret it. The head commissioner looked at James. Mr. Whitmore, is everything Ms. Bennett said accurate to your vision? James cleared his throat. When he spoke, his voice was steady. Yes. Every word. She understood it better than I could explain it. He paused. The truth is, I design buildings for people, but I'm not always good with people. I see the world in lines and spaces, and how light moves through a room, or how a layout can encourage interaction. But Olivia, she sees the hearts that will fill those spaces. That's what makes this project work, the combination of design and humanity. For the next hour, James walked through the technical details of his proposal. And Olivia added stories and context, painting pictures of how real people would use each space. They fell into a rhythm, his precision complementing her warmth, his expertise grounded by her lived experience. The commissioners asked questions. The investors took notes. And slowly, Olivia watched skepticism transform into interest, then possibility, then cautious enthusiasm. When they finished, the head commissioner smiled, the first genuine smile of the afternoon. We'll need a few days to deliberate, but I'll be honest, this is the most compelling proposal we've heard. You'll have our decision by Friday.
Outside!
Standing on the sidewalk in the weak afternoon sunlight, Olivia and James looked at each other and simultaneously started laughing. The kind of giddy, disbelieving laughter that comes after surviving something terrifying. I can't believe you did that, James said, shaking his head. I was dying up there, completely frozen, and you just jumped in without thinking? Saved me, he corrected. Saved us. Saved the whole project. I couldn't let it fail, Olivia said simply. Not when it matters so much. James stepped closer. It matters to you? Of course it does. It's not just your dream anymore. She smiled. You kind of made it mine too. They stood there, the city moving around them. Two people who'd spent 6 months dancing around each other finally standing still enough to really see. Olivia, James said quietly, if this project gets funded, if we actually build this thing, I want you to be part of it. Not just as a tenant, but as a partner. You understand the community aspect in ways I never could. We could build it together, she finished. He nodded. Together. The word hung between them, meaning more than just the building, more than just business. It meant morning coffee conversations that lasted longer than 30 minutes. It meant blueprints spread across tables and dreams shared without fear. It meant taking the terrifying step from watching someone from afar to letting them in close enough to matter. I'd like that, Olivia said. But James. Yes. Next time you want to tell me something, you don't need blueprints or presentations, just words. Simple, honest words. He smiled. That transformative smile that made him look younger, lighter. Like these, I've been in love with you since the 3rd week you worked at Morning Grounds. When you drew a tiny umbrella on my cup on a rainy day and wrote "Hope this helps" underneath. Every morning since then, I've walked into that coffee shop hoping this would be the day I'd be brave enough to tell you. Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes. That's a pretty good start. And these words? Would you have dinner with me? Not a working lunch, not a business meeting. An actual date where we talk about things that have nothing to do with architecture or coffee, where I try to be as brave in person as you make me want to be. Yes, she said, laughing through tears. Yes to all of it. 3 days later, they got the call. The project was funded. The Riverside Community Culinary Center would break ground in the spring, 6 months after that. On a cold December morning, Olivia stood in the shell of the building that was slowly taking shape. Watching workers install the massive windows that would flood the teaching kitchen with light, James stood beside her, pointing out details, explaining how each element would come together. "It's going to be beautiful," she said. "It already is," he replied, but he was looking at her, not the building. That evening, after the workers left, they stood together in what would become the community dining area, surrounded by concrete and potential. James pulled out 2 ceramic cups from his bag, both covered in Olivia's drawings, and poured coffee from a thermos. "To new beginnings," he said. Raising his cup, "It's being brave enough to build them," she replied. They drank their coffee in the space between what was and what would be. 2 people who'd learned that the most beautiful structures aren't made of steel and glass, but of courage and connection. Of small daily kindnesses that accumulate into something extraordinary, and somewhere in the future, the building would open its doors. People would learn and create and gather. Olivia's bakery would fill the space with the smell of fresh bread. Lives would change, but the real transformation had already happened, 1 cup of coffee at a time. Until 2 lonely people learned to stop watching from a distance and started building something together. The rest was just blueprints coming to life.